Good afternoon. I'm John Charles from the Poison Pen Bookstore, and welcome to another virtual author event. I'm delighted to have with us today one of my favorite authors in the world, New York Times bestselling and award-winning Susan Elizabeth Phillips. Before we start our chat, I do have one brief commercial message. We do have a limited number of signed copies of Susan's new book, When Stars Collide. And if you're like me, you absolutely have to have something signed by your favorite author. So if you're interested, please go ahead and go online to the bookstore or give us a call, and we would be delighted to send a copy of When Stars Collide out to you, signed by the author herself, while supplies last. Now, without further ado, I'd like to welcome Susan Elizabeth Phillips.
Hey, John. Hi.
How are you?
You know, I'm really good, but I got to warn you, I didn't tell you this before we came on.
Okay.
I've been doing enough of these and I've gotten old enough that I have lost my filter. So,
Did you ever have a filter, Susan?
I had a little bit of one, but not quite as much. And I do not appreciate that book poster behind your head. It needs to be a big one when stars collide. I don't want to be greedy here. I'm just pointing it out.
Well, next time I'll arrange for that.
Thanks. Appreciate it. So I've been telling, you don't know what happened behind your head, but it was really
Somebody
cool.
took it away.
Oh, golly, I am so evil. So I've been telling everybody that those of you who don't know John was a librarian for many years and was one of the leaders in terms of getting libraries to recognize the romance fiction collections. He has been such an advocate for the genre. We all love him. And then when he retired, he became a bookseller, which became even better. You're also really super widely read. And I know we're going to talk about that. So I'm just really happy to be with you here, although I'm glad it's virtual and I'm not in Scottsdale right now.
That's true. It's not the best time. Let's go ahead and get started. And my first question for you is, as difficult as it is to imagine, given the millions of Susan Elizabeth Phillips readers out there are still a few people who know nothing about you. So can you tell us a little bit about life before becoming a writer? Who was Susan?
She was the same person then she is now. I started writing when I was home with two little kids. Our oldest was 6 and our youngest was 2. And I started writing actually as a reader. I think this happens with so many of us. We're huge readers, and all of a sudden you get an idea and you think you want to write it yourself. I wrote my first book in collaboration with my neighbor, which was so much fun. We had written about 120 pages of it and found a way to actually talk to a living editor. This was at Dell Publishing. She said we could send her what we had in our synopsis. We didn't have a synopsis. We didn't know what was going to happen in the next chapter, let alone the whole book. But we came up with something, sent it off. 3 weeks later, she bought that book. It took us 2 years to write it. We were paid a $3,500 advance, and we had to split that money in 2. But that was the beginning. It was the only book I ever wrote in collaboration. It was a historical romance that is out of print and will stay out of print. But it was just a great experience. And then from then on, my partner ended up going to law school. And from then on, I had a career by myself. And it wasn't nearly as much fun, I got to say, as writing with somebody else.
True. Okay, let's talk a little bit about your new book, When Stars Collide. What can you tell us about that?
This, readers I know always like the idea, like to know how you get the idea for the book. And all of us who are writers have an idea file. Sometimes it's on our computer, sometimes it's just scraps of paper stuffed into files. Usually we have both of those. And after I finished Dance Away With Me, I really, because that was just a little more of a serious book, I really wanted to write more of a comedy, or especially I'm always looking for an idea for a stars book that I think will make a great stars book. I've told readers that there will not be another book in the Stars series if I can't come up with a really good idea. I don't want anything bad to happen to the series. So I was looking through my file and I saw these two words, and they were opera singer. And the minute I saw those words, I just cracked up. It made me laugh because immediately I thought, okay, opera singer, football player. And the only wrinkle, and I've spoken about this before, is that Mr. Bill had given me strict orders. He said, Susan, you cannot do any more quarterbacks. These Chicago Stars already have more quarterbacks than any team in the NFL. And that didn't sit right with me. I got kind of a little huff about it. And so I thought, I'll show him. I'll make the hero of this book the backup quarterback. And that's what I did. But that turned out to give me the whole idea of this woman who is heading for the very top of her career. She is a #1 opera superstar, this fabulous mezzo-soprano, and the world is her oyster. The hero is about the same age, but in football years, occupationally, that puts him at the end of the career, and he's always been #2. A little problem with his vision kept him from ever living up to the potential he wanted. So he's the backup, never quite good enough. He's had his whole career playing in the shadow of someone else. And he is not going to live his romantic life in the shadow of someone else. So that was the setup that I kind of saw right from the beginning, and just absolutely fell in love with these two characters. It's the diva and the quarterback when Mozart meets Monday Night Football. And I love that combination.
Were you an opera fan before you began the book?
Neither before nor now. There are some arias that I really like, but I have trouble with opera because of the over-the-top plot lines and the people dying in the end. And I understand that it is, I mean, it's a fabulous art form. It's something that I don't necessarily connect with, but there are some pieces that I just can play over and over and over again. So learning about this world was really interesting for me. I started out with working with my yoga teacher, who happened to be the choral director for our local North Central College here in Naperville, Illinois. And she helped me kind of get started with ideas about voice. Then I talked to some people at the fabulous Lyric Opera of Chicago, and got some information on how that actually works. But then I had the stroke of luck. Do you know Megan Chance, author Megan Chance?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
This is Megan's last book.
So wonderful.
So I'll talk to you about this in a minute, because I love this book. Megan turns out not to be just a writer, but she's an opera singer. So what I could do as I started writing these paragraphs that had to do with voice and opera, this is the ideal source, because I could send them off to Megan. She'd read them and show me where I'd gone astray and how to fix it. And that's something that only another writer can do. So she's the one who brought the book home for me. And while we're talking about Megan, this book, I don't know if you've read it yet, A Splendid Ruin, is about the San Francisco earthquake. She takes you inside what it was like to wander through those streets. And also she talks about, we've got a great heroine here and kind of a Gothic plot. This is a book I highly recommend. I went right through this. I really, really loved it, even if I hadn't already loved Megan. So that was kind of how I dealt with the opera.
Yeah, it's a wonderful book. One of the other things that fascinated me about When Stars Collide was the idea that your two characters were brand ambassadors.
Yeah.
I hadn't really heard about that. Why did you kind of latch onto that? Are you hoping to become a brand ambassador yourself?
Yeah, I'm an ambassador of Susan Elizabeth Phillips. That's where it ends. Yes. I've noticed a lot of sports figures are brand ambassadors for luxury watches. I heard Tiger Woods represented the Tag one, whose name I can never say right. And I think that was also the same one Tom Brady recommended. And I heard Tom Brady doing sort of an uncomfortable interview promoting his luxury watch. So that was always in the back of my head. And I needed a reason for these characters to be together. And that was a blessing, having that idea of the two of them promoting a luxury watch just kind of pop into my head. So they're on this private jet with this luxury watch company, going around the country promoting this watch in the media, having client dinners, and this tour is going to be a month-long tour. So they're stuck together for a month, and it is really going to get complicated.
Now, the book does have your trademark zippy sense of humor, but it's also got a little bit of a darker side too, because the heroine has some issues from her past that are kind of coming up, and there's kind of a thread of mystery suspense to it. Did you intentionally want that?
John, you know me. I don't intentionally do anything. I stumble into everything. Um, the Almost every one of my books, even the ones I label this a rom-com. I think it's questionable. It's fair to call me on it and say, well, it's not quite a rom-com, because it does have mystery, and you do have a heroine with a backstory. But every one of my heroines has backstory, because one of the characteristics of all of my books is helping a woman, or showing a woman's journey to become who she's meant to be. And that means that she has to overcome obstacles, internal as well as external. So when we're dealing with internal obstacles, there's going to be something in her past or something she's dealing with that is really holding her back. And we find that out with Olivia too. The suspense plot, I don't think of myself as a suspense writer, but I was kind of proud of that. I thought that one.
Yeah. I mean, it's worthy of any other author in the Poison Pen, the way you wrapped it up. I think when you're talking about your heroine, it kind of ties into something I heard you quoted saying is perfect people bore you.
Perfect heroines of no interest to me, because I think I'm interested in people in the journey of their life. And I think so many of us are. And that's why I want to see a heroine who has flaws, who's wrestling with issues. I don't want a heroine who has everything, her life together, and every time the hero says something, it's going to stomp her foot and go, "How dare you?" That's just not my thing. I love these kinds of stories where we watch a woman learning how to be her best. And of course, for that to happen, the hero has to learn how to be his best too. He has to overcome some stumbling blocks to get there.
Now, this is part of your Chicago Stars series, and you've generally been credited with creating the modern contemporary sports romance. And that, I think, went back all the way to It Had to Be You. Was that your first book in the
Before
series?
that,
Before that.
it went back to one of my first big books, a book called Fancy Pants. And
Oh,
that is a book where the hero is part of the most boring sport in the whole world, which is golf. He's a Texas good old boy. So I did, Fancy Pants was actually the first sports romance. And I want to say, I'm so bad with dates, that was 86, 87, someplace in there. Maybe it was a little bit later. But after I wrote that book, I found out that there was a rule in romance that you're not allowed to write about sports, rock stars, or actors.
hmm.
Um, but I didn't know there was a rule when I wrote about it, thank goodness, because we've discovered the athlete hero is just a great, great hero. It's a great archetype to work with. And over the years, I've written athletes, rock stars, and actors, and enjoyed doing all of those. I'm guessing that rule probably came from early days at Harlequin with series romance. Perhaps it impacted foreign sales or something like that. But I was so glad that I didn't know you weren't supposed to do that, because I'm a rule follower and a former school teacher. We tend to be rule followers. And if I'd known that, I'm not sure I would have had the nerve to write Fancy Pants. And Dally Bodine in that book is one of my very, very favorite heroes. We see him in Fancy Pants. We see him again in any of the Wynette, Texas books, in Lady Be Good, in Call Me Irresistible. He's quite a powerful figure. I love him.
What is it about sports figures that draw in so many readers?
Well, it's a powerful archetype, right?
Mhm.
You've got the soldier, you've got the sheriff, you've got the detective, and the athlete is just another. When you're looking at these really macho professions, it makes for a good base for a hero. And I think with football, it becomes really interesting to me, because I'm not going to write 27-year-old hero and heroines. So this means I have to deal with an athlete at the end of his career where he's going on to something else. And of course, my books are never about football. I think only one of them actually ever had a football game in it, which was the first one. It had to be you. It's just a wonderful landscape for me, for the characters, and to see how they interact.
What was the most challenging part of When Stars Collide to write, and what came easiest about the book for you?
It's hard for me to answer that because I don't write from an outline. It,
Mhm.
I plunge in with this idea. I don't know where I'm going. It's just such a messy, inefficient process. But unfortunately, it's the only way I can write. So I feel like when I'm writing a book, I'm just like writing through the muck, trying to find out where the story is. I always say I never get the characters until about 9 months in. That said, When Stars Collide was one of my easier, and we'll put that in air quotes, books, because I had such a clear vision from the beginning. I don't always have that. So I only nominally complained about writing When Stars Collide, which for me is quite a task. The easiest thing for me almost always is dialogue. I don't have a creative writing background. My college degree's in theater, and I loved, acting in the old days. So I think in terms of dialogue, and that's my strength. Figuring out plots and counterplots and subplots, that's always tough for me, because as I think about something, I'll go, well, that's stupid. I mean, I'm just like my worst critic. That's idiotic. Nobody would believe that. And so I have to work through that to get to the point where I go, you know what, that isn't stupid. That does make sense. I cannot handle manipulating my characters to advance plot. In other words, making those characters do something that is not part of the personality that's been created, just so I can get a plot point in. And that makes it really tough. Sometimes I'd really like to manipulate them, or I'd like to have a handy tornado come through and stir things up, but that's just kind of not the story I'm interested in.
So for you as a writer, it really starts with knowing the characters. They have to be
Yes.
organic to the story.
Yeah, yeah. I'm working on a book now, which I'm not going to talk about, except to say I'm still, I don't know, I'm 5, 6 months in, and I've taken these characters only one level deep. I still don't know who these people are. It's making me crazy. This is what we mean about the wine, because until I really figure out who they are, it's really hard for me to figure out where the plot's going to go. So Olivia and Thad were a blessing, because I had more difficulty just figuring out some of the structure in this book than I did the characters. They were pretty much full formed right away.
Um, you've been writing for quite a while now, and you have your process. What advice would you give to someone who's just starting out as a writer?
Butt in chair. It's the same thing almost all of us say. Writing is hard. Writing is scary. Having written is fabulous, but the actual act of writing is really hard work. And there are so many ways that we procrastinate to make us think we're working. I mean, before COVID, you procrastinated by going to conferences and writing workshops, and answering email and setting up websites and getting on Instagram and Facebook, but no pages were being produced. I think for all of us, that famous quote, I can fix a bad page, I can't fix a blank one, that just gets us going most days. Just get something on the screen, work on it. And if you're scared, you know what? Put on your big girl pants. That's the way it's going to be. Just sit there and do the work.
That's true. You have a rather unique publishing schedule. I know that many authors are encouraged to turn out books on a certain timeline, but your schedule kind of ebbs and flows. And I was surprised when When Stars Collide came out, because it was a little bit quicker than I expected.
That's because there was such a long lag before Dance Away With Me came out. So When Stars Collide was already in really good shape before Dance Away With Me came out. Now there's going to be another lag there after this one, before the next one. And I would if I could write a book a year, I would love it. And it's not because I'm not spending the time. It's just because I feel like I flounder so much. And a book won't leave my desk until I know it's absolutely the best I can make it. So it involves a lot of rewriting, which I love. It's the blank screen that takes so much time for me. And so I'm not ever going to get faster. I'll only get slower. But I can't imagine, even though, most people my age have retired, for me, I can't imagine doing that because writing every day gives a structure to my life that I love. That doesn't mean I'm not going to drop everything if I've got an opportunity to be with a grandkid. But otherwise, I'm going to write part of every day because it keeps me vital. It keeps me young. I love the way it structures my life, but it is going to mean I'm never going to be fast.
See, I guessed wrong. I thought it was because the pandemic hit and you were forced to stay home and couldn't travel. So
Pandemic, I feel guilty about this, but the pandemic was one of the best things that happened to writers. Now, I said that to Kristen Harmel, the author of Forest of Vanishing Stars, which came out today, which is an amazing, amazing book. I said that to Kristen. Well, Kristen has 2 young children. The pandemic was not good for her writing schedule, but for some of us, it really was. You couldn't do anything else. So yeah, When Stars Collide is my pandemic book.
you talked a little bit about some of the books that you've enjoyed reading. Can you share a few more with us and maybe
Oh, I
tell
sure
us what's
can.
on your summer reading list?
Um, the ones behind me. So today, The Forest of Vanishing Stars came out. This is a World War II book, and I'm kind of over World War II books. And I got to tell you, I could not put this thing down. Harmel is a wonderful lyrical writer. She has a character in here. The heroine is one of these a wild child raised in the forest. I'm a sucker for that. That was great. Pack Up the Moon, the new Kristen Higgins. Oh my Lord, have tissues handy. This is a deeply emotional book. And it's one that you are just going to sob through parts of it. So when you want that kind of experience, that emotional experience, I highly recommend Pack Up the Moon. Sonali Dev's Incense and Sensibility just came out today. And this is part of Sonali's Jane Austen series, when she moves that world into the world of Indian Americans and it takes you into a new kind of landscape and does it so well. Susan Mallory's The Stepsisters has been out for a while. I've really, really enjoyed that. I'm going to be talking to her on Thursday. And oh my gosh, The Last Amanda Quick. And this is the one, The Lady Has a Past. For those of you who haven't read, and Amanda Quick is also Jane Ann Krantz. She has a little bit of split personality. And she's created this Burning Cove series, which is set, she has brilliantly set this in the 1930s. So you have kind of that glamour that you remember from those 1930s black and white movies. And she takes you into that with a really great mystery. What I like about Jane's books is they're page turners, and she's got really great heroes and heroines, but they don't take me into a really dark place. So I wouldn't call them cozies, but I would say they just take me to the place I want to go. Now, if you want to be scared witless, Christina Dodd's new one, Wrong Alibi. This is set in Alaska. Oh my gosh. She's really doing a great job with thrillers. I mean, I think this is a thriller, don't you?
Yeah, it's definitely, but as you said, it's not graphic. It's scary. I
Yeah.
mean, you're on the edge of your seat, but you're not looking at bodies being cut up and
No,
in freezers or something.
I can't do that. And Mary Bly's Lizzie and Dante.
Yes,
This book
another
was
weep
quite a
read.
surprise. A lot of you know Mary Bly as Eloisa James, but Lizzie and Dante is a book that she's written under her own name, and it's just like a vacation to the Isle of Elba, and which is a place that Mary knows very, very well. I love the food in the book. I love the setting in the book. So these are some of the things I've read recently that I'm really, really loving. What about you? What are you high on today? I always get great recommendations from you.
Well, you said you were kind of over World War II books to a degree, and I kind of agree with you. There seems to be a glut of them on the market, but I read one earlier this year that just made the top of my list. It's The Last Bookshop in London by Madeline Martin,
Yeah.
and it's set right before World War II starts. The heroine is a young girl whose mother and father have died. She was working in the family store. The uncle and aunt kind of kicked her out, so she's come to London to kind of make her way with a friend. She doesn't have recommendations for a job because her uncle, they left on bad terms. So her new landlady gets her a temporary job for 6 months in a bookshop in London. Now she's not a reader. She right up front, she says she doesn't really read books. She's not into that. The bookstore owner is a curmudgeonly old coot, it's got all those elements. But the war starts, she falls into the job. She discovers the power of books to change people's lives during war and during peace. She discovers the power of reading. It's like many of the books you mentioned, I was like stocking up on Kleenex and parts of it, but it ends very optimistically. And there's a very sweet kind of romance thread through the story that ends satisfactorily for romance readers. So
The
really, just
Last Bookshop in Paris,
in London.
in London, in
Yeah,
London.
by
That sounds
Madeline
really
Martin.
good. Now that sounds like I'd like that.
It it reminds you of why we're readers and why books are so important. And you look at their lives during World War II. I just thought it was an amazing book. And despite the fact that there seem to be like 4,000 World War II books right now,
Yeah.
that one really stood out. Another one that I think you might like if you haven't heard of is called Blush by Jamie Brenner. It just came out last month. It's about 3 generations of women in upstate New York. They have a family vineyard there. The grandmother and grandfather have been running it. Their daughter kind of left because she wasn't given the power in the company to actually do things, to run the vineyard. Even though she had the skill set, it was very patriarchal. And the granddaughter is a college student working on her thesis, and they're all gathered together for the summer. And the granddaughter discovers in the library this kind of scrapbook of a book club that her grandmother had in the early 80s that was devoted to scandalous books of the time. So like Jackie Collins and Judith Krantz and all those writers. And ironically enough, 40 years ago was the publication of Lucky by Jackie Collins. So
Right.
but what the book does is it talks about these women, how their relationship is kind of repaired over the years, what happens to the vineyard because it's in financial trouble. But it's also about these books from the 80s written by women that were so often, I'll say, denigrated by critics and by some people because, they were just shopping and sex and there was nothing to them. Brenner actually demonstrates how, in many ways, fiercely feminist those books were for the time.
They are.
Yeah.
And nobody saw it except other women. These are books, when you look at Jackie Collins and Judith Krantz, these are books where women have a lot of power. They gain power, and they are not soft and cuddly women in these books. They go after what they want. And that is the same kind of thing that happened in a different way with all of those early historical romances that we call bodice rippers, because bodices were always ripped. These were women who didn't have power, and they were up against a hero who also served as the villain because he had all this power over her. And what happens by the end of all those old historical romances? She has the power. So I think it's so interesting, and it's so typical of what happens when especially the male literary academy looks at books designed for women.
Yeah, it was a fun book, and it made me want to go back and reread some of those glitz and glam.
There's isn't there a documentary out right now on Jackie Collins?
And her life was really amazing in many ways. She was her books to some degree.
When I was doing actual live book tours, I talked to a couple of author escorts who had escorted Jackie Collins. Every one of them had wonderful things to say about her. One of them talked about how Jackie wanted to go to Target to find, a blouse to wear. And it was, I liked hearing that. I thought that was really cool because those author escorts, they know what authors are pains and what authors are really, really nice people.
They do. Now, I think you had kind of a raffle quiz type thing that you wanted to.
This is going to be so cool, John. You're going to love it.
Okay.
So here's what we're going to do. This is a trivia quiz. Now, the rules are, I'm going to read little bits of dialogue from some of my books. You have to guess what book it is. Unfortunately, because we're doing this under a time, kind of a time crunch, you're not going to have a lot of time to think. But give it your best shot, what book you think, and they're all books of mine, of course they're all books of mine, what book you think is I'm referring to. Then we're going to do a drawing after the event. We'll go through and the bookstore is going to pick a person at random who participated. You don't have to have the right answer, but you do have to have a title at least of one of my books, even if it's the wrong title. The person that we give the drawing to is going to get a $50 gift card to the Poison Pen. So we'll announce the winner tomorrow. So everybody get ready to play. In the comments section, write the title of whatever of my books you think this might be. I'm going to read the quotes. Are you ready for number one? I'm going to be interested. Oh, John, you read so many books. You're never going to be able to do this, but some of my readers might be able to. Summer camp was supposed to be fun, but Daphne was sad. Ever since she capsized their canoe, Benny had been mad at her. So tell me what book you think that is. And the way I read it was a clue. She flounced off with her elephant trotting behind. If she'd thought to look back, she would have seen something that would have surprised her. She would have seen her tough, humorless husband grinning like a teenager. Elephant was the clue there. This might be a little harder. We'll make a joke out of it. Say we had too many drinks and started watching Skip and Scooter reruns. We were swept away by nostalgia, and it seemed like a good idea at the time. This is an forced, what do you call that? Marriage.
Marriage of convenience.
And no, it wasn't a marriage of convenience, an accidental marriage. Okay. And Skip and Scooter is the key there. We have crime here, he said, just as any other place does. Keep this door locked from now on. Like that's going to stop you, she retorted. All you'd have to do is give it one good kick and not from me, you ninny, he says. She says, I hate to be the one to break the bad news, but if they find my body, you're the one with the biggest grudge. Here's an interesting one. I'm fixing to come to blows with that caterer, she exclaimed, the gold hearts bobbing at her ears. The minute he said he was from California, I should have told you to find somebody else. He's using tofu in an hors d'oeuvre and he didn't even deep fry it. My accent was the cue there. However bad it was. Wait a minute. Oh, I love this one. He said, I never thought I'd have to give you, a former Sunday school teacher, a lecture on ethics. Former Sunday school teachers, she replied, don't go around without their underwear. He says, you show me where it says that in the Bible. And here's a bonus. Someplace here. I'm mixing these questions up because I didn't want to do the same one I did last time. And now, oh, this is a good one. Of all my life experiences, Thad muttered, I never once imagined myself wandering around in the Colorado mountains with only a pair of boxer shorts, my old Nikes, and a naked diva. I think everybody should get that one right. Okay. Did y'all comment? All right.
Getting lots of comments, yeah.
Did you? Good, 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 good. Okay, I'll tell you what some of these are now. I hope since I messed up my order here. Okay. Summer camp was supposed to be fun, but Daphne was sad. Ever since she'd capsized their canoe, Benny had been mad at her. And that is This Heart of Mine. And that's Daphne the bunny and Benny the badger, who are stand-ins for the hero and heroine in the book. This is the one where this is a Chicago Stars book where Molly is the children's book author. By the way, I have finally written a Daphne the bunny story. That's the good news. The bad news is it's no good for kids. You're going to see it one of these days. Oh, okay. Next one. She flounced off with her elephant trotting behind. If she thought to look back, she would have seen something that would have surprised her. She would have seen her tough, humorless husband grinning like a teenager. And the elephant was the cue there, and that's The Circus Book.
Circus.
It's an angel. We'll make a joke out of it. Say we had too many drinks and started watching Skip and Scooter reruns. We were swept away by nostalgia, and it seemed like a good idea at the time. This is one of my standalone books, What I Did for Love. I love that book. It's about a hero. The hero and heroine used to be stars of this old sitcom, and it was a huge hit, but they hated each other. And now it's many years later, and they're reconnecting, and things don't go well there either. We have crime here, he said, just as any other place does. Keep this door locked from now on. She retorts, like that's going to stop you. All you have to do is give it one good kick, and not from me, you ninny, he exclaims. She says, I hate to be the one to break the bad news, but if they find my body, you're the one with the biggest grudge. And that is another standalone. That's Ain't She Sweet with Sugar Beth. And this is a little trick question. I'm fixing to come to blows with that caterer, she exclaimed, her gold hoop earrings bobbing. The minute he said he was from California, I should have told him I told you to find somebody else. He's using tofu in an hors d'oeuvre, and he didn't even deep fry it. And that is also from Ain't She Sweet. Ain't She Sweet is a book that I quote a lot in writers' workshops about the unsympathetic heroine, how you take a heroine who has done things before the book started that are sort of unredeemable and make her the heroine of your book. Love that book. And he said, I never thought I'd have to give you, a former Sunday school teacher, a lecture on ethics. Former Sunday school teacher, she replied, pretend I'm doing a British accent. Don't go around without their underwear. You show me where it says that in the Bible. That is the irrepressible Bobby Tom Denton from Heaven, Texas, which is the second of the Chicago Stars books. Bobby Tom makes his first appearance in It Had to Be You, and we meet him there, this arrogant young wide receiver out of Tularosa, Texas, and then we see him again in his own story in Heaven, Texas. By the way, if you're new to my books, every book stands alone. The Chicago Stars book do not have to be read in any order. You don't have to keep track of a million characters. Every book is a standalone. I mean, a lot of readers are really anal. They want to read every one in order, but you don't have to. And you knew this last one. Of all my life experiences, Thad muttered, I never once imagined myself wandering around in the Colorado mountains with only a pair of boxer shorts, my old Nikes, and a naked diva. And that is When Stars Collide. By the way, so we'll let you know who won the $50 gift card tomorrow. We will draw a winner from any of you who participated. That scene, the so-called hot tub scene, happened to friends of mine. People are always telling me these stories. They'll say, oh, I can't wait. You got to put this in one of your books. And they'll tell me some lame story that is not that interesting. But this one really was. So I decided to use that. So I love to do that. It's just fun to take, to be able to remember some of those old books.
Yeah, such a terrific oeuvre. Should we take a few questions from some of your readers?
Oh, sure. Anybody wants to ask any questions? I'm here.
My first question that I see is, which is more challenging for you to write, the first line in a book or the last?
The words that come between those two. Neither is particularly challenging. The first and the last lines usually are fairly easy. Yeah. It's the second through the 300th on from there.
Don't you think, though, that there's a lot of importance placed on the first line because that's how you hook the reader? If you
Yeah, and some of them are better than others. I mean, no, and I will never be able to write a first line like I did in Natural Born Charmer, where he didn't expect to see a headless beaver walking down the side of the road.
Mhm.
That's my most famous first line. But you want that beginning to grab the reader. And the other thing I like to talk about in writing workshops is how you can't front load all of your backstory in those first chapters. You can't just do an information drop in the beginning, thinking, well, the reader has to know this before they can follow the story. No, all of that information, you can write it all there, but you're going to have to move it later and weave it in more skillfully. I think, actually, I think Jane N. Krentz is one of the very best at starting a book at a high point of action. She just plunges in. You're not getting any backstory. You're not getting anything like that. She plunges into a dramatic moment. And that's just a great skill.
It is, and a perfect example is her new quick book, The Lady Has a Past. The heroine takes out the villain with a golf club.
Yeah, yeah.
Just don't miss
My
that.
favorite, though, of beginning is Tightrope, where the heroine is climbing up there on that net. Or I can't remember if it's a heroine or who, but that putting them in the middle of the circus, that scene was really, really gripping.
Another question is, how do you come up with the names for your characters, and how important is the character name when it comes to writing their story?
That can be really tricky, because some of, like, my favorite names are my boys' names. Well, I'm not going to name a character after my boys.
Mhm.
And occasionally I get it wrong and have to go back and change it, or sometimes it'll just pop into my head. Olivia popped into my head. Olivia Shore came up pretty quickly. The heroes are always, I think, harder. I had trouble with Thad. I had just done a book with Theo. And actually I had to do a search before I submitted, a word search before I submitted When Stars Collide, because I noticed several times during the book I had mixed up Thad and Theo. It just happened. But yeah, it can be tough. And last night names, I mean, I don't want to name a hero Sperm Coltrane, one of those over the top macho names. I got to find a name that seems like it could actually be a person's name.
The next question is, how involved are you with the design of your book's covers, and can you talk about the latest book cover?
Oh, this cover was a gift. And I am embarrassed to say I have not written the cover artist a thank you note for it. Covers are tough. We had, hold on, where is, it's right here.
Sure.
Hold on. This was the last book cover for Dance Away with Me, which was, more of a women's fiction book. I mean, certainly a happy ending love story. And we had a really tough time with this cover. And it turned out to be my least favorite cover because I'm not crazy about landscape covers anymore. I feel like there are so many of them that they kind of get lost. But, we did our best. And I think the paperback where we turned it into pastels worked better. But this didn't feel original to me. This one came out of the art department. It was like the first thing I saw. It wasn't like we saw 100 covers trying to make up our mind. It just captured the spirit of the book. I loved Olivia's headscarf and her sunglasses and those stilettos with the football right under her toe. I think originally we didn't have the plane in there, and Carrie Farron, my editor, had that added. I mean, it was a gift. It was not a struggle. It just showed up at my computer one day. The only thing was we chose colors, and I love, love, love yellow covers. So that's how we ended up with it. I have input into covers, but ultimately it has to be a group decision. because we have to talk to people in sales and people in marketing, people who are actually in stores. I have taken book covers into our local Anderson's bookshop and had them had booksellers look at them. It's a collaborative effort.
Another question we've gotten a couple times from your readers is, what does your writing day look like? Is there a typical writing day?
Kind of, yeah. I'm a morning person. So, I get up and I either do my yoga on the mat or take a 2 or 3 mile walk, have some breakfast, take a shower, and then I sit down and write. I do a little web surfing first, but I have to put a time limit on that. And I usually work until maybe noon, 1 o'clock, sometimes 2 o'clock, and then do personal life stuff. So, and I kind of do that pretty much 7 days a week. I like to write every day, even if it's only for a half an hour, so I don't lose the thread of where I am. But pretty much doing the writing in the morning and real life in the afternoon. And of course, in the summer, I'm in just a little corner of my office. I have a beautiful office, but in the summer, I write on our screen porch. And when we're in California at our place there, I have no dedicated writing space, so I just wander from one chair to another, and it really works well. Bill is so he's doing his own thing, and he's so used to me writing that we just kind of I can be sitting in the same room with him and writing, and he's not interrupting me, so that works really well.
Another question is, how do you determine the titles of your book, and how early in the writing process is it decided?
Titles are just really something. Dance Away with Me was originally titled The Runaways. And we gave that up because there were so many other ones like that. And my daughter-in-law came up with that title. We did, Bill came up with Match Me If You Can. He came up with First Star I See Tonight. It's tough. When Stars Collide, we had a terrible time with this. And then I got locked into the fact that I wanted to call, I love having star titles with Stars books, but I don't always do that, of course. But I like having that. I liked First Star I See Tonight, and I kept trying to come up with a star title for this book, and one was stupider than the other, and I got frustrated. I thought, I want to call this book Star Wars. And anyway, but once I thought, I really want to call it Star Wars. Could I do that? No, you couldn't. But that led me to When Stars Collide. And once I thought of it, I thought, oh, that's it. That's it. And I'll text my editor any time of day or night if I come up with a title. And she sent that one back with one word, love. So I knew we were good.
Another question is, do your characters change in the story from what you thought they were originally supposed to be doing? Or I guess the variation is, how much control do you have over your characters?
Is that question, it would assume that I know who these characters are before I start writing, but the book is a process for me of discovering who they are. And they do change as I get to know them better. Then I may find out that something they've done at the beginning is no longer consistent with the character I've created, which again sends me back rewriting and rewriting and rewriting.
Now, this is an interesting question. I'll be interested to hear your answer. What was your guilty pleasure during the pandemic that you indulged in?
What was my guilty pleasure?
I guess it could be a television show.
I binged Schitt's Creek, which I didn't want. I watched the first season. I just wasn't into it, but then I kind of got into it. But I'd only watch it at night right before I went to sleep until Bridgerton came on. And I binged Bridgerton during the day. That was the guiltiest thing I did. Yeah, I'm not too much into guilt when it comes to pleasures. Wasn't Bridgerton great though? Yes. I mean, it was just so much fun to see that.
And there's a graphic novel coming out this summer.
Yeah,
based on the Bridgerton series. Now that things are kind of going somewhat back to normal, but not completely there, do you envision a time when you'll actually be doing in-person events, or are you pretty much going to stay with virtual?
No offense, but I'm tired of virtual events. Yeah. No offense. Yeah. I loved them at the beginning. I love the fact that I can reach more readers with them, but I'm missing the body contact. I'm missing the hugs. I'm missing sitting and just standing there and getting pictures taken with readers and meeting them face to face. Yes, I mean, I can reach many more readers this way, but I think people are getting zoomed out, which is it's going to be a challenge, and it's going to be really interesting to see how book promotion changes after all this. I kind of foresee a combination of
Mm.
in person, but I at first I did not miss the live events at all because I could do them from home. I could keep writing. I didn't have to travel. But I'm at the point now where I need to be seeing readers one on one again.
That's great. I can't believe how quickly our time has flown by.
Oh my gosh,
Uh,
it has.
Yeah, it has. Well, you're always a delight, Susan. I do want to again say we have a limited number of signed copies by Susan of her new book, When Stars Collide at the Poison Pen, and I'm sure they're going to shoot up in value in a few years' time. So if you're interested, go ahead and go online or give us a call. I want to thank you, Susan, for sharing time with us and for all of your wonderful recommendations and funny thoughts and just amazing writing skills.
Thank you, John. You know, I love talking to you, and I'm just so glad that the Poison Pen is doing these wonderful events. It's just a great store, and this has been a virtual event. I have to say that I've really enjoyed. So thank you.
Oh, thank you. And thank you all for tuning in. This is the Poison Pen Bookstore. We'll see you next time.